What's going on, Texas? You guys doing well? Well, hopefully you're doing well in this room, because it doesn't feel like we're doing that well outside of this room. You guys sort of notice that? I have a feeling if we were going towards the path to destruction that we are right now under President Trump, people would be talking about it. If we had a president that their plan, you saw this week, was to put Joe Biden in orthotics and have him do some basic calisthenics because their election plan is to stop having him fall on his face in front of world leaders. I mean, doesn't seem like a winning strategy for America. What do you think? Yeah, you're laughing, but that's where we're at today in America. That's the strategy. Remember the handshake to nowhere? And to show you what we're up against, guys, just so we understand exactly what we're up against, you saw the handshake to nowhere because the leader of the free world can't remember how to get off a basic stage that he got on 30 seconds prior to that. But when I called it out, they said, no. Media, I got fact-checked. No, he was waving to the audience with an open hand. I go, the audience was there. Like, it's not that hard. He was like a deer in the headlights because whatever they gave him had worn off. We hear almost nothing from our mainstream media about the Biden impeachment inquiry. But I have a feeling, folks, and I only know this because by this time in my father's presidency, I had done approximately 50 hours of testimony for treason. So we understand what that means. That is a crime punishable by death. Right? Hunter Biden, I'm not even sure he's been subpoenaed yet, unless it happened today and I just wasn't paying attention. I had done 50 hours for treason. They say, there's no evidence. No evidence whatsoever. Other than emails, photos, wire transfers, sworn testimony, recorded conversations. You're right. Other than that, there's no evidence. But it didn't stop them from doing Russia for what, 3 years? Some of them are still running with it. It was proven to be a lie, but that doesn't matter. It was used to interfere in elections, both midterms and generals. That doesn't matter. It was the basis of an impeachment inquiry that happened like that because we're playing two different games, right? And I'm watching it this week. We'll talk about this because I'm curious to see what you guys think. But I'm watching, I go, when I see some of the rhinos get soft, no, well, there's rules and decorum. I go, how come they don't play by rules and decorum? They just use it to you and you bend over and fold so rapidly. Right? The rules only go one way. When the rules benefit the Democrats, they enforce them. When they're against the Democrats, they don't enforce them, but we play along. When I bet back the second time to the Senate Intelligence Committee, a second time, because they needed to bring me back for something that was already by this point disproven and a lie, but the Democrats on the committee play that. No, well, it's a bipartisan committee. So they call me back, they do this, and the head of the committee at the time took me into the room after another hours of grilling. And again, they're not looking for anything. They know it's a sham. But what they figure is if they get you in a room for 50 hours over multiple months in different committees, maybe you say something just slightly different. Because then they got you for perjury. Right? The guys like, Brennan, McCabe, Strzok, they can lie before Congress. There's no consequence to them doing it. They did it in front of the American people for years. There's no consequence. In fact, they get rewarded. They get high-paced jobs. They get to be the commentator on CNN talking about decency, the rule of law. They lied before Congress. None of that matters. It only goes one way. I understand this crowd, so I got to be a little careful, but I always ask, if it was the Don Jr. laptop from hell, I'm just saying, the Don Jr. laptop from hell, I imagine would be, what would we say, disqualifying? I'd be in Gitmo, and my father would have sent me there. Okay? Because I would have deserved it. They'd have thrown away the key. And just so we're clear, right? You're watching the media do this, right? Hunter Biden, he's a legitimate businessman. I go, listen, the Chinese are many things, but they're not stupid. They're vicious, they're dictatorial. I'm not apologizing for them, but they're not morons like we are, right? They don't have like a diversity, equity, inclusion program that says, you know, our money managers that we send $1 billion to, we don't have enough crackhead representation. We need more crackheads managing $1 billion, right? They don't do that. We would probably do that. That's an underrepresented group. We must allow that to have. They don't do that. They only do that if they're buying you, right? Just like every other thing that was against Trump, you saw the ruling this week. Magically, about a few hours after, oh no, the wire transfer had Joe Biden's home address on it. You know, because the emails with 10% for the big guy and Hunter saying that, you know, I don't take half your salary like dad does to the rest of the family, who all also happen to be on the payroll. I'm trying to figure out why the Chinese government and CCP-related entities are paying the grandchildren, the mistress, the ex-wife. None of them are international business people. Minor details, Hunter wasn't either, but that doesn't stop them. I have a feeling that would be a problem. But no, there's no evidence. That's before we get into the photographs. But this crowd is way too nice and conservative to get into that. But I have a feeling if some of the videos that we have seen, if they were Don Jr., would also be a big deal. I say these things, oftentimes much more explicitly than I will in this room. I gotta behave a little bit. There's younger kids here, you know. They know what I'm saying. They're probably worse than even me at times, but you know, not on a stage. You know, I have a feeling that those things would be a bigger deal, but they aren't. But again, you know why they're not a bigger deal is because we're playing two different games. We're playing t-ball, right? While the other side's playing hardball. For far too long, we've said, well, we're going to live and let live, and we'll turn the other cheek, while the other side has weaponized every institution in government, every institution in our culture against us. And you know who the bad people are? You know who the terrorists are? Practicing Catholics? No, they're terrorists, according to our DOJ and FBI. You know who else is? Yes, especially concerned mothers who simply would love their children to, I don't know, learn maybe math or English in school rather than the 9,476 genders. And I don't mean to forget about the other 1,000 that have probably been created since I started this speech about 10 minutes ago. Because because that is literal violence. Me not including them is literal violence in their mind. You know what's not violence? When a guy drives through a Christmas parade in Wisconsin, that's not violence. A car magically did it. Remember the headlines? A car drives through a parade. I was like, that's incredible. You know, just like guns shoot people, not sickos. We're playing two different games. I got to ask the crowd, actually, because I've done this all over the country. And thus far, the results are stunning based on what I hear from, let's call it Senate Republicans for the most part. How many of you would say Ukraine is a #1 issue for you by show of hands? No. Okay. How about top 3? No one. How about top 10? Okay. As God is my witness, not one person has raised their hand in this room. Am I correct? As a top 10 issue. It's a top 10 issue for you? Okay, so there's one dude. That's the first time. No, seriously, that's fine. That's fine. I've done this 50 times across the country in front of thousands of people. It has not been it's now a top 10 issue for at least one person of thousands, but that's it. But no, and that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. Okay? Mitch McConnell is out there saying we need to send more trillions over there to protect their border or something. We're not going to have any controls on the money. And he's saying it's the #1 Republican issue. And I'm wondering, why is there such incredible a disjoint between the people we send to represent us in Congress and the actual people? You guys saw it. I'll give the one guy in the room, I'll give him 100% credit. So that was the first time. I was batting 1,000 until this guy with about 15,000 people probably. And that's fine. But think about that. In a room this big, you guys aren't afraid to speak up. I'm not bullying you. I asked it in a very nebulous way. I'm giving the guy that said it total pass, even though I totally disagree. Well, I would like to, I don't know, maybe take care of our border first. You know, if 10,000 Russians invading Ukraine is an invasion, why isn't 7 million at our border? I can't figure it out. Now, I understand that I am new to this, relatively speaking. Relative to like the people who are in Congress, literally dying in Congress. Like, I'm new to this. You know, Joe Biden's been there for 732 years or something. I can't remember exactly. But it's not that hard to figure out. Why is one a priority and one is totally not, even to the Republicans? I get why the Democrats want it. They want to populate the cities. They want to do this at the next census. Even if you're not a citizen, you get counted. You sway Congress and that's it. They'll never actually play by the rules, like the globalists will never actually play by their rules. The environmental lobby, John Kerry and stuff like that, he's never really going to play by the rules. Remember that one last month, I guess it was? Mr. Kerry, as you go to all these climate conferences on your plane, I don't have a plane. Sir, you were here under oath. You don't have, no, I don't have a plane. Well, it says right here on the manifest, the plane of the Kerry Family Trust. He goes, oh, well, you know, my wife has a plane. I'm like, oh. I mean, but this is the sort of hypocrisy that we see daily, and we sit there and we take it like, oh, it's great. Bill Gates, he doesn't have to worry about flying on a plane that has more carbon emissions than any of you will produce in your entire lifetime in a 4-hour flight. Because, well, he's fighting for a cause, so it's different. He's exempt. The people that want you to eat bugs, they'll be fine with you eating bugs. They're going to keep eating steak. But like, as long as they get rid of most of the cows and feed you bugs, you know, someone's got to eat the rest of the cows, right? It's going to be them, not you. How is it this hard? Right? I mean, I couldn't do it. It got so bad, the debate the other night. No, but seriously, it's Texas, so I'm always curious to see a different opinion. It's a little bit closer, but I'm watching a debate where it felt like it was being hosted by MSDNC, right? Like they're talking, what will you do in favor of gun control? I'm like, what? Like, I thought we were being punked, and I'm watching a bunch of Republicans vying for the presidency of the United States, the leader of the conservative movement and the Republican Party, like, argue about what we're going to give the Democrats, who would give us exactly zero in anything. No quarter, no nothing. You bend over, you succumb. You give in. You totally capitulate, or they will cancel you. They will finish you. There's no question about it. I saw that on gun control. I saw virtually the same thing on amnesty. What could possibly go wrong? Hey, guess what? It was in the Reagan Library. I think they figured that one out, but they still haven't. And what you realize is there's no consequence to failure in D.C. If you're a Republican and you bend that knee, if you capitulate when it matters, you can actually be kind of conservative most of the other time. You know, you can go talk to, usually it's a small group, about 4 people, and be conservative, as long as they know you're going to roll over and die on the things that actually matter. When the people that put you in office actually want you to have some guts, there's a better word for it, but I'll save that as well. If you Yes, backbone. That's almost exactly what I was thinking about. If you bend, you have an easy existence in Washington, D.C., and I think that's what it must be. You know, it's like, I just want to be loved. And I asked a congressman, someone who's a fighter, it was Matt Gaetz, it was like a couple years ago. I was talking to Matt Gaetz, and I go, like, why won't they fight, man? I'm so new to this. Hey, I'm the son of a billionaire from Manhattan. Like, how am I more aggressively conservative than I don't know, various congressmen from Texas or other places? I was like, I don't even understand. He goes, well, it's almost like, you ever see the movie The Distinguished Gentleman with Eddie Murphy? It's the name you know, right? So some guy's in Congress for 40 years, he dies, someone with the same last name enters the race. You know what I'm talking about? And wins, becomes a congressman, and this person sat on a city council for 20 years doing nothing, and now they're in Congress. And someone's kissing their ass. And they're invited to the special dinner, and they think they're cool and special, and guess what, folks? They're in the big leagues, and they're never, ever, ever going to leave until they carry them out on a box. And that's what it is. I love that. And that's what it is. They're never leaving that power, so they'll do whatever it is to stay. And the problem is, in D.C., all of that power is concentrated. If the Washington Post, the Amazon, Jeff Bezos' own Washington piece, well, maybe the hit piece they do on me will only be a 4 instead of a 3 out of 10. Maybe they won't, I'm like, why don't you fight against that? When those guys hit me, it's a badge of honor. At this point, when conservative media hits me, it's a badge of honor because they don't and have not earned the respect to be out there fighting for the vast majority of the people that I see in this country. And you get it, you understand it. Because I look at, I came from a business background, unlike Hunter. He's just made a lot more money because, it's nice to be able to sell out your country. In my next life, I want to be a Democrat because you can be literally insane. You can do anything and there's no consequence. It's kind of nice every once in a while. I was like, this week, I apparently, I guess did fraud or something. I was trying to figure out with my lawyers who the victims are. They can't figure it out, but we were hit by a New York City judge for all sorts of things because we paid back banks that we borrowed money from in full with interest. I'm trying to figure out what we did wrong. They can just disregard witness testimony from the banks in question that said, of course we do diligence on things, right? A judge can disregard a broker in Palm Beach, Florida that says Mar-a-Lago is worth X and say it's worth 1% of X in his mind. And just doesn't matter. We'll disregard all of that stuff. That's what we're up against, guys. If you think this is a moment where, they just don't like Trump. No. This is the case study. Look at all the people they're going after. And I won't compare these people to my father, but just as an example. Russell Brand this week, right? Last week. Right? Strange, man. Russell Brand, just like Justice Kavanaugh, is apparently, according to these people, a serial rapist. That's terrible, obviously. Why didn't this news come out when he was married to Katy Perry and one of the most famous people in the world? I'm trying to figure that out, because you'd think if someone was so terrible, you'd have a problem with them prior to them just being I don't know, let's call out vax mandates. Let's call out Big Pharma. Let's call out the hypocrisy. Let's call out the war machine. No, but they didn't have a problem with them before that. As long as you're doing their bidding or agnostic, you can do and live a very peaceful existence. I saw Jaco Bouillon's in here earlier. I know he's done some incredible. Jaco, are you in here still? No. Done some incredible work as it relates to human trafficking and child sex trafficking across the world. I've known him since probably, early 2015. That's about the time I met Tim Ballard. I met Tim. I heard the story. You've all seen the movie at this point, probably. Right? Yeah. So I introduce Tim Ballard. I was like, listen, I don't make many calls to the White House. Again, I'm not Hunter. If I get involved, it becomes a problem. But I was like, this one is like, you know what? Even in the insanity of the world that we were living in at that time, I go, we should all be able to agree that, like, trafficking of children for the purposes of sex is a bad thing, right? Like, you would think that we live in a normal world. You would think that would be 100% in a country where political victories are won on, like, the margin of basis points, 0.02% difference. But you'd be wrong. You'd be wrong, folks. I made that phone call, told my dad, I was like, listen, you realize, like, there's a problem, right? You know that something, but until you actually get it, you have no idea the scope. Like, of course there's bad people, but you thought of it as like tens of people, not tens of thousands of children. Right? So you start hearing about the numbers like, hey man, Dad, you gotta meet this, because this is a guy working in the federal government, working for these things, doing these things. Meets with my father. And this is when I knew we're actually fighting evil on the left. It was the first time. And listen, at this point, they'd already tried, I had met him. I didn't make the call till a little bit later. And, they had already tried framing me for Russia. I was still naive enough. Even in Russia, when they're trying to put me, I guess in the electric chair, I was like, well, if the FBI says, like, something's wrong, there must be something wrong. They must be trying to do good, right? If the CIA is saying these things, now I realize none of that is even remotely true. In fact, it's probably the opposite. Just like, again, concerned mothers going to a PT meeting are domestic terrorists. I can't stress that enough. If that point in and of itself does not get you thinking about just how far we've fallen as a nation, I don't know what will. Because again, it's not like it's like some left-wing magazine that wrote this. This is the head of the FBI. Our Department of Justice that seemingly has been weaponized against all of its citizenry, right? We talked about the judge in New York, but it's no different than the judge in D.C. They find the most vicious one, and all the January 6th people get in front of that one, and they get to find them and throw them in jail for years, because they took a selfie inside the velvet ropes. By the time they got into Congress, they didn't even know they weren't supposed to be there. They hold the exculpatory evidence for 2 years. Doesn't matter. So I introduced Tim Ballard kind of de facto to the White House, and I was like, you guys take it from there. And they form a committee to look into the trafficking of children and sex trafficking of minors. And they do a press conference, and they're going to fund it with, like, what was it, $200, $300 million, something like that? And I'm like, this is great. And the left was losing their minds. Remember that one? How dare they do? I'm like, what? Like, seriously? They're covering for their friends at this point. And, again, those things, like every other conspiracy theory, when I say conspiracy theory, let's call it the truth prior to others actually acknowledging it. Right? Like, no. It's always risky, but, like, can someone please name a conspiracy theory that wasn't proven to be right 6 months later? It used to be like a year, right? Russia took 3 years. And, like, with each and every conspiracy theory, when the left loses their mind about it, like, you're over the target, right? Now it's like 6 minutes till it's disproven. And you're right, but there's no other explanation for it. Each and every one has been proven right. Your conspiracy theorist friend is owed major apologies by the major institutions in media who have lied to us for decades. Big tech who've smothered and censored those things. And again, just because you don't hear about something doesn't make it not true. Big tech is a $1 trillion industry, weaponized and designed to smother anything that isn't in lockstep with the Democrat Party. Our mainstream media, including a vast majority of conservative mainstream media, is in that same exact boat. I actually legitimately believe that today we are winning on the issues. People get it, but there are still lots of people. You know, they're agnostic. They're trying to feed their family in Joe Biden's economy, and that's harder and harder to do every day. We're not in a fair fight, folks. We're not, our ideas versus their ideas. We think that, but it's like, no, it's our ideas versus their ideas backed by a $1 trillion regime that has instilled fear in people, whether it's online, big tech, or a $1 trillion mainstream media regime that will dox, that will call you out, that will try aggressively to ruin your life. They're trying to do it to us every day. One of the other sort of memes that's proven 100% right was like, they're not really after Trump. They're after you. He's just in the way. No, but think about it. What is it now? I think it's total offenses, 750 years plus the death penalty. I mean, that's kind of a big one. No, and some of the claims against my father. I mean, he's a young and vibrant man, but, it's a long time. You don't think that them doing that to him is designed to send a message? You don't think that, it's like, well, no, it's different for him because he did all these things. Again, they've all been disproven, just like Russia was. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Stick you in a New York jury with this, and we'll make sure we cherry pick the worst possible judge in the world. It doesn't matter if he's been thrown over every time on appeals. They got the appeals court too, and if you're on a jury, even if you think it's ridiculous, is it worth your social credit score going down in New York where you'd be thrown out of your schools? You'd be tarred and feathered in a PTA meeting if you're the actual person on the jury that was like, listen, it doesn't seem like there's anything wrong here. Again, it's not like we haven't been doing business in New York for 30 years. It was only when we put the little R next to our name that it changed. You know who I did my first political fundraiser for ever? And this is a hard one for me to actually admit out loud, but Andrew Cuomo. Yeah, no, seriously. His mother and my grandmother used to sit next to each other in the hair salon in Queens growing up. And if you're in New York real estate and it's the attorney general, that's the person that literally has to sign off on every one of your offering plans, right? You build a building, you're going to sell unit 502, they've got to sign off on it. That's how the system works. You have to play that. I've been a lifelong conservative. It doesn't matter. My first political fundraiser was for him because that was the way it worked. We understand all these things. Trump understood all those things. That's when he called out Hillary. Like, oh, you're yakking about all these things, but you did nothing to change them because your donors do exactly what I do. I'm just man enough to call it out. I'm not going to be the hypocrite about it. But in those areas now, you know how to stop the looting in Philadelphia? Give everyone a MAGA hat. Look, come on. They'd be in jail in less than a minute. But, now I read the headline. It was this week. I think it was the looting in Philadelphia was because people they were looting for bread. I'm like, last time I checked, and I don't go there often, but my daughter does, Lululemon doesn't have a lot of bread. Because I'm looking at the store, I'm like, there's not a lot of bread in a Lululemon. There's not a lot of bread in the Gucci store, and yet everyone seems like, unless you're eating Gucci loafers, which you're probably not. But this is the insanity, I remember mostly peaceful protests in the summer of love of 2020. At least that's what I was told. It didn't seem like that on TV, but I'm not an imbecile. Because there were buildings burning in the background, but it was mostly peaceful. Then the reporter who's saying it's mostly peaceful gets hit in the head with a brick. I'm like, doesn't seem mostly peaceful. But again, it doesn't matter. So that's why we have to get involved, guys. I get it. They've made it very difficult for people to want to stand up because you get picked out. They'll target you. They'll go after you. They're going to make it uncomfortable. You know how much more uncomfortable it's going to be if they win? You know how much more uncomfortable it's going to be for your children when they don't have, let's call it the freedoms I guess we thought we had. It's not real, right? Just like, again, even me, even with what they were doing, it took me a while. I will say, one of my biggest regrets, like early in my father's presidency, was like, as I mentioned, it was like, when they tried targeting General Flynn, because I'm sitting there like, wow, the FBI said it, the CIA said something, there must be something to it. But I knew the man, and I was like, fine, I'm not going to come out against him, but I'm also not going to be in there fighting and defending, because like, there's got to be something to it. And again, there doesn't have to be anything to any of it. So what we have to do is we have to get uncomfortable. We have to be unafraid. If they can put out one man by himself, they can take him out. They did it to the most powerful man in the world. They did it to my father. Now, again, all of those things are lies, but it doesn't matter. Just like all the conspiracy theories that are proven true, we sit there and I get on Twitter, and I'm guilty of it myself. I'm not pretending I'm immune. Ha, see, we were right. Ha, you guys are stupid. We knew all along. But guess what? They got what they wanted out of each and every one of their lies. Again, there's no consequence to being wrong. There's no penalty. None of these people get their lives back, their homes back, the years they spend in prison back, the tens of millions of dollars blown on legal fees to fight these things. Just because something's BS doesn't mean you don't have to deal with it. And 2 years later, Fauci was working for the Chinese and taking money there and lying before Congress. Oh, it's different, right? It's fine. We need to get in the game. We need to get together. We need to be fighting the same battles. We need to take the wins when we can get them. And that's why it's important for us to all get together right now and actually start fighting this battle. They're loving what's going on right now. The consultants that are being paid very heavily. I saw this most out of Ron DeSantis' campaign because, you see where the money goes. It's public information. When big consulting firm, they take $60 million profit. Like a billionaire donor gives, these guys take 25% of the ad buy for every commercial that's run, 25% of the placement. It's their creative agency that's making the ad. That's another 20%. It's one giant grift. And we're seeing it again. The reason people in the single digits aren't polling, well, I can leverage this into a cabinet position. I can leverage it into a book tour. I'm not sure what Chris Christie's doing. Maybe he likes the free meals. Listen, if you're Chris Christie, that's probably a significant motivator. It's not going anywhere. He was very proud of his Donald Duck comments the other night. I was like, really? Like your nickname is Krispy Kreme and Butterball. Those are your two, no. Well, that's literally behind closed doors. That's what people called him for years. I'm like, those are your names? I'm like, the best you can do is Donald Duck? I'm like, we're shaking in our boots now. I like Donald Duck too, but my name's Donald, so it makes it a little, I guess I'm sitting there being like, it could be worse. But this is going to keep going. And what they're going to make sure they do, and why the Democrats are loving it, and why Joe Biden is posting Ron DeSantis clips, talking about inflation, is because they don't care. Those people, their consultants, they don't want Trump to win. Right? They want an illusion that the conservatives are fighting for this, but no. What they want is they want to be able to pick who's the next guy so they can represent them and make $50 million from their failed campaign. I knew Ron DeSantis' campaign wasn't going anywhere because I'd spent weeks with him. I'd argue that there was probably no one that did more campaign events with Ron DeSantis in person in 2018 that wasn't a paid person than me. So I knew when they're seeing all the memes and this, it's like, oh, so you hired an influencer. I was like, just wait till they see him in long form. Meaning anyone can look like a badass in a 5-second clip, and then you add in a bunch of special effects, and it's like you're dunking on some moron local reporter that doesn't know what they're talking about, and everyone gets paid to promote it and I go, just wait. No, seriously, give him the mic for 30 seconds. And you notice, the second he got the mic for more than 30 seconds, it was over because he doesn't have that. Eventually, in this world, you got to be the guy up on that stage. You got to be the guy willing to do this, not the guy that sits there and can't answer the most obvious question of the debate. What do you think about the weaponization? Is it a big deal? The weaponization of our government against their political rivals? I don't know. Where are my consultants? Can we poll test this? Where are my donors? What would the billionaires that are funding my campaign because we have no small dollar operation because it's not real? Where are they on this issue? Remember that one from the first debate? Like fear. Where do I go? It's like a no-brainer. Like if you can't figure that out, like you shouldn't be making decisions for anyone. But that's what we're up against. That's the consultant class. That's the Washington elite. They have almost as much disdain for hardworking Americans as the Democrats do. Democrats, if you're a hardworking blue-collar American, so you're an idiot. Well, you'll still get the UAW leadership vote because they've been bought and paid for by the workers' dues and given to the Democrat Party while they simultaneously take your job and your American dream and ship it to China for electric vehicles. But they're still going for it. I think a lot of those voters, that's based on and those workers who are union dues-paying members, notice Trump got a lot more of those people than Joe Biden did. But it doesn't matter. They're literally giving a huge portion of their paycheck to the union that's giving it to Democrats who are literally destroying their very existence. And that's D.C. in a nutshell. That's what's going on. So we need to get back there, and we got to actually fight. And that's why they're going after Trump the way they are. They're going after my father the way they are now because they understand that he's the only guy that will actually do that. Everyone talks about it, right? We will bring peace to the Middle East. I was like, yeah, I don't know. I'm 45. I've been hearing that for 45 years, and it was going on for a long time before that. Why is Trump the only guy that could actually get it done? Same thing about Roe v. Wade, overturning that and getting people who will actually do it, not people that will be bullied into folding. Same thing with the embassy and moving it to Jerusalem. Remember that one? That was going to be the start of World War III. Why? Because incompetent bureaucrats who'd never accomplished anything said it would be. Right? And they tried instilling fear so we don't do something that we want. So we don't follow through on our promise. They put political pressure. The resolve it took to override that political pressure is not to be underestimated. Okay, that's not easy. I get that. What ended up happening? It's like two people threw rocks for like 30 seconds, and it was over, and it was done. Finally, someone got a promise done. Right? North Korea. How? Trump is doing it all wrong. I remember watching the news for like 2 years every morning. Trump's doing it all wrong in North Korea. And then, they have their experts. I'm like, well, why are you an expert? Because I've been leading the delegation in fighting North Korea. Like, well, so what have you accomplished? Well, we have done a lot. Please, no, have you met with the guy? No, why would we do that? I mean, it's crazy. They can't even get in the room because they're incapable. They're morons. Okay? Our Secretary of State, who was given the job as a handout because he was the one that orchestrated getting 52 intelligence officers to sign off that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation, Anthony Blinken, he became our Secretary of State. Not because he's good at what he does. He's obviously an imbecile, as evidenced by the results, but he was rewarded that position because he gathered those people to lie, to sway an election. Again, election interference seems to be a really big problem for the Democrats, but not when they're doing it. That's different. When radical leftist activists take over courthouses in Seattle, Portland, when they storm Speaker McCarthy's office, that's not an insurrection. That's different. It's in the name of social justice or something. There's always an excuse. Okay? Blinken. The adults are back in charge, we were told, when these people took over, right? I remember after the botched Afghan withdrawal, our Secretary of State, sort of our biggest diplomat abroad, got on a world stage and before Congress and said he is shocked and dismayed that the Taliban, whom we'd been fighting for by 20 years, so we kind of know them by this point, you would think, but shocked and dismayed that the Taliban did not install a more diverse and inclusive government in Afghanistan. I was like, if you're dismayed, fine. You're shocked? Did you think there was going to be like a trans coalition in the Taliban? Probably not, right? Probably. They weren't going to bring like Leah Thomas, the male swimmer who like won every NCAA record in swimming because he decided to become a Shia about 15 minutes before nationals, right? They're not probably giving that guy a seat at the table. This was a group of people that threw homosexuals off buildings for 20 years. We knew that. But we're shocked. They don't look at the idiocy of our politicians and mimic them. We're shocked. Same people that left them $87 billion worth of equipment, the same people that want to ban you from having an AR-15, left the Taliban, 75,000 or something? M4 fully automatic machine guns and tanks and Humvees and missiles, whatever. You realize how far we've fallen when you see these things. I remember when that one was going on, I picked up my son from school. We're going to do a father-son dinner. He was 9, I think, 8 or 9 at the time. I guess he was 9. Hey, Dad, why would we leave the Taliban? 84, 86, whatever it was, $billion worth of equipment? It's a good question, son. I got nothing for you. My son thought I was an idiot because he was like, what do you mean? Why on earth would we do? Hey, Dad, why did they pull out, our soldiers before, our civilians and, the people who helped us? I don't understand. It's that's a legitimate question, son. Yes, you're right. I don't know. I'm not going to be one of these woke, when you see these people on TV, my 2-year-old spoke to me about nuclear proliferation on the Korean Peninsula, and they were shocked and dismayed. He didn't know what biometric was, but he knew that we had left them machines that could scan, when we go through, clear or something like that. Yeah. Then he didn't know what the word biometric was, but he knew that we left the Taliban, who'd we been at war with for 20 years, machines that could scan and figure out who was bad and who was on our side and who was good, and we gave that to the people who they were at war with for 20 years. And he couldn't believe it. My 9-year-old understood this. And the adults that were back in charge didn't. So, it's pretty simple, guys. We need to get together. We need to fight back. We need to say enough is enough. And we need to be unafraid. Because if you think it's bad now, just wait. Just give these guys the time. They've shown everything's on the table, right? I mean, it's not like, they just want to limit a little bit of your Second Amendment. They'd get rid of it entirely. But it's not just the Second Amendment. If you've been watching, your First Amendment's on the table. And it has been for a long time. By the way, all of this stuff has probably been going on, but Trump derangement syndrome made them say the quiet parts out loud, finally. Okay? I imagine we'd fallen much further than any one of us could have ever understood. You know what may have been our saving grace? Probably COVID. Because the same teachers that wanted to shut down our schools, the same people that would label concerned parents domestic terrorists, they had to teach from computers. And parents could walk by and be like, you're learning what? Schools that are graduating classes of people that have zero proficiency in English, zero proficiency in math. There was a solid couple hours of the trans curriculum every week. It may be one of the great cell phones of our time, because now people finally understand what's probably been going on much longer than we could ever believe or imagine. But now that we know that, okay, we got to stop turning the other cheek. We got to stop living and let live. These people would end us. They would throw you each in the gulags. If you're in this room right now, You're on a list. It's not just me. I'm on every list. Just by being in this room, you're on some. And I'm not saying that jokingly. But that's how far it's come. So it's great to see this. It's great to see what Christian has done with the Texas Youth Summit. I love that they're working with Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA, because that's what we need to do. We see that so much. Well, I just want to control faction, and this is my little power play. No, we got to get together and we got to fight, because the enemy that we are up against is truly sick. It's truly deranged, and we need to fight for what is right, and we must never, ever relent. So Texas, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Just please stay in the game, okay? Thank you, guys.
Everyone, I thought it would be appropriate that we would do something different tonight, and we would pray for our country and pray for Don and his family. What do you think?
We need it. Thank you, guys.
So if it's your tradition, maybe you would extend your hand, or whatever you feel comfortable with, but let's pray for Don and his family. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the blood of Jesus. That is why we were saved. Thank you for our country and for the founding and for all of those that are fighting to save and preserve our country. Thank you for President Donald Trump and giving him to us. He's worked so hard to save our country, the greatest president of our lifetime, and he takes so many bullets for us. His whole family's relentlessly attacked on every single level, and everyone associated with him. I pray that you would continue to bless President Trump and restore their family. And I pray for Don, and I thank you for the gift. I know he must be so proud of his family. That's his greatest treasure is his family. They're such a blessing. So God, I just pray that you would restore their family and open up new doors and opportunity and put a hedge of protection around them in this upcoming season. I pray everyone that's attacking him on the right and on the left, I pray that would just be water off of a duck's back. I pray that nothing, no weapon formed against them would prosper. We pray that you would make America that shining city on a hill, as Ronald Reagan referred to once again, and that it would be morning in America again. We pray this in Jesus' name. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, guys.